warm welcome to Anangal. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to the people who are joining us today from different parts of the world. We are about to begin our next session on the topic Are your containers really secure by Mr. Kumar Ashwin. We are really pleased to have you here, sir, and I welcome you to RedTeam Security Summit 2021.
Thank you so much.
To talk about Mr. Ashwin, Mr. Ashwin is an information security professional with Payat, focusing on web and cloud security. He believes in gaining knowledge by sharing it. He contributes to communities such as NULL, the Open Source Security Community, DEFCON, Cloud Village, etc. to name a few. He loves playing and developing CTS. He's an avid learner and his curiosity drives him to work and learn about different domains such as telescopes, network pen testing, etc. It's an immense pleasure to have you here, sir. Thank you. Now you can take the stage is all yours. You can start the session.
Thank you so much. Awesome. So I will switch off my videos to save some bandwidth. Let Yes. So I hope everything is good. Uh, just a sec. Yeah. Okay. So today I will be talking about are your containers really secure? So the motive behind this talk is understanding what are the common misconfiguration that we as developers perform, and how simple the solutions can be so that we can really secure the containers that we work in. So containers have gained massive amount of um, massive amount of popularity in last uh, decade, and so the security compromises has also been increased. So this is about the talk that we are going to get through in half an hour or 45 minutes. So a bit about me. My name is Kumar Ashwin. I am a security consultant at Payatu. So Payatu, talking a bit about Payatu. Payatu deals with web security, web pen testing, cloud auditing, DevSecOps, IoT security testing, and many more. You can go to payatu.com and have a look. And for me, you can find me on 0x Cardinal on all the social platforms. And you can go to 0xcardinal.com to see all the previous talks that I have given, and uh, my timeline that I have been doing. So, what is the agenda for today? The agenda for today, first understanding why container security is required, and uh, the importance of security while dealing with containers. The second thing is overview of container security. This talk will not be talking about what are containers and how are we going to deal with it. Rather, this is basically focused on security aspect of the container. So the prerequisite is a bit about containers, and even after this talk, you can go back and look at what containers are. So overview about container security. What are the different tools, technique, and procedures to protect containers, to secure containers properly? What are the best practices that one should follow in order to keep the security intact? And what are the resources that I suggest so that people keep learning even after this talk? So let's dive into why container security. So recently, many attacks come on cloud, on the supply chain attacks. So the base of all of it is container security. So recently, half of 4 million public Docker Hub images have been found to have critical vulnerabilities. So Docker Hub is a registry of all the uh, images that we use to build containers on, and it has been found that around 2 million public Docker images have been found to have some really critical vulnerabilities which have working exploits, and these are just those images which have been tagged on Docker Hub. So uh, this is one of the main reasons that we need to look into container security, because it is growing day by day, and the security aspect has also to keep up with all of the hype. Security aspect has to also keep up with it. So recently we have seen the Azure functions have also been affected because of the new Docker container escape bug. So not even the big companies, not even the big companies like Azure, Microsoft are unaware of it. So and uh, the containers that we use, they can, and there are several reports on HackerOne as well, where the container breakout happens to local file reading, even the host machine compromise. So these are a few reasons why the container security is really important. It is growing day by day, and the security, the people dealing with containers have to be aware of all the security issues that are there and how to deal with them before they get compromised and there's a loss in the business. So there are not these three only, but there are many more such instances which which supports our statement that the container security is really important in today's world. So, talking about container security overview. So, let's go to the matrix attack, micro attack matrix, where all the different aspects of a proper pen test has been given, and what all things are incorporated in that. So let me go to my browser and show it to you. So this is the matrix, container matrix, where we there are different parts of a proper pen test. The initial access, then the execution, persistence, privilege escalation, defense evasion, credential access, discovery, and impact. So in initial access, the so containers hold application that are publicly facing. Containers hold websites. Containers hold different services like FTP and other different public facing services, which can be utilized to access get the initial foothold onto the containers. So exploit public facing application, exploiting web apps, exploiting services, external remote services, then getting valid account credentials, default accounts or local accounts credentials. Then once we have that, we then move to execution phases. There's the container administration commands, the deploy containers, the normal scheduled tasks or jobs that are being run, compromising all of that will lead to the execution. The container orchestration job is one of the subpart of scheduled tasks. Then user execution. Executing a malicious base image is also um, one of the section in user execution that allows the attacker to get a proper foothold into a container. So once the basic malicious activities has been executed, the attacker looks with the perspective of persistence, how one can stay inside that container and get as much information as they can. So again, the same things from as we have seen. External remote services, we as attacker create external services, create backdoors in order to create persistence, create new users, create valid accounts, create scheduled tasks, so that uh, every time our persistence get deleted or not present on that system, a scheduled task runs and gives us back the persistence. Then privilege escalation. We have a certain amount of privilege inside the container. And in container, there's very less amount of privilege that is generally given to the user or the attacker that are inside the container. So privilege escalation plays a very important role in that. So escape to host contain this is also known as container breakout. So being in one of the containers uh, is does not give that much attack surface to the attacker, but escaping to host machine will give a lot more. So the basic idea of using containers are dividing a big chunk of task into smaller parts, so that even one machine get compromised, one container get compromised, the others don't get affected by that, and the mitigation time remains low. So being in just one container does not help that much, as if the attacker manages to escape to host, they can they can be of far more critical that far more critical attacks that can perform. So for that, again, schedule tasks, schedule jobs, valid accounts. These are the subparts of like how to escape to host, and what are the privilege escalation techniques that we can use. For valid accounts, we can talk about vertical privilege escalation techniques. Suppose we are on level one or the normal user, and we get credentials of an admin user, and we escalate our privilege to that. Then defense evasion, masquerading as a legitimate name or location. Suppose a few containers are only allowed from a specific location, from a specific region. Suppose if you're hosting on AWS, then masquerading as this specific location will give you the access, will give you the access to that container. Then credential access. How will you get the credentials? Again, there are different techniques: social engineering, brute forcing, unsecured credentials. So these are a few things that we need to take care of when we see the container as a whole, on about discovery and the impact. The impact that it gives is resource hijacking is one of the most important and most critical one. Um, because it gives the complete control of the container in the hands of the attacker, and they can perform any kind of attack that they want to, be it denial of service on an endpoint on that specific container, or if the container are misconfigured, this can escalate to network level as well. So Mm, this gives us a pretty good idea about how we are going to see containers, and how are we going to attack, and how are we going to move while we are doing a proper pen test. So what are the different attack surfaces? So containers are not much, but just like our machines, with less overhead than the normal ones, and they are just processes being that are using C groups and namespaces to isolate themselves from the host. So these also come into the attack surfaces: C groups, namespaces, configurations, how the container are configured, and what all things are in that container, and how are they configured. So the volume that are shared volume that the host and the container are using, if that is secure, and if they are properly configured, the network that they are hosting, and how they are communicating with other containers, different registries, if the container images that these registries hold are vulnerable to some kind of attack. So these are the different attack surfaces that your containers, different container attack surfaces that are present, and there are much more to that. So, before we dive into tools and tools techniques, let's talk about what a container engine, in this case Docker, gives provides us to monitor the images and the activities. So, when we talk about Docker, we there are different kind of uh, images that we build and run on Docker. So there are some images that Docker provide out of the box, like Docker history, Docker inspect, Docker logs, Docker system events. So uh, these commands will give us an overview of what these things are doing, what each image is doing, what all are the commands that are being executed, and how these commands are getting executed. And it will give you a proper log, so that if something happens, you can go back to those logs to analyze what was the problem in order to mitigate it. Other than that, we we talk about some tools. We are going to talk about some tools. The first tool that we are going to talk about is Trivi. Trivi is a vulnerability and misconfiguration scanner for containers and other related artifacts. So it scans the container for the vulnerabilities that are present in them, and it also scans the infrastructure as a code, the code that you have written to that helps in building containers for any kind of misconfiguration. So in the screenshot below, as you can see, I have run Trivi in Alpine 3.10, in which Trivi has found one CVE, that is of critical severity, in the library APK tools. So this helps in giving us a understanding of how vulnerable an image is, and uh, what are our requirements, so that we can avoid using this image and update to a newer version. So Trivi can also be built into the DevOps pipeline, where we are using containers. So if some container with known vulnerabilities come up in the DevOps pipeline, it gives us the result that this is not a safe version, and you would want to update the version of the container image. So Trivi is one good option for scanning the containers before deploying it. Now, talking about HoloLint. So while creating images, we write Docker files. So Docker files, let me give you a brief about what Docker files are. So Docker files are something where we specify line by line the instructions on how a Docker image should be built, what all things should happen inside that image, and what ports to expose from the container to the outside world. So using linters like Hadolint, uh, it will give it will help to it will help to build best practice Docker image. So as you can see in the screenshot, the line one is from Debian. So by default, the Debian package takes the latest version. So if something like, suppose you are hosting an application A, and on Debian latest version, and that the application that you're hosting is on Debian latest version, is dependent on that version itself. So if the new latest version comes, your application might break. So for that, we use specific versions from Debian, then colon, and what is the specific version of that Debian image from uh, which we are pulling from the Docker. So, so the yellow lines that you see, Uh, these are the recommendations that they provide us. And similarly, uh, as you can see in the line 7, we have we have exposed port 80,000. That is not possible, as the valid Unix port range is from 0 to 65535. So it gives us all kind of best practices that one should follow, and this actually helps in writing a good Docker image. So there are other linters as well that can be directly incorporated into your IDEs, and that will make your workflow way easier. Then there is another tool that we are going to talk about is Dockle. So Dockle is a tool which scan the images for against the CIS benchmark. So let me open up the CIS benchmark for you guys. Yeah. So Dockle compare these points uh, against that image. So if you go to github.com, good with tech/dockle hash checkpoint comparison, it will give you all the things it compares for, even the comparison with other tools. So, some of the common things are uh, use copy instead of add in Docker file. So this is the common thing that we are going to talk about in the best practices section. Then do not store secrets in the Docker file, and then avoid using latest tag that we talked about. That avoid using sudo commands. So these are a few things that it provides us with. Let's go back. Yes. So Docker scans the images against the CIS benchmarks, and it gives a good idea about what is the state of security of that specific container image. So there is this another thing that I really like is Spec Comp. So Spec Comp is a security feature in Linux kernel. It can be used to restrict any system calls in the Docker container. So SecComp is not something that is apart from Linux, but it is incorporated into the Linux kernel. Um, what this does is we provide it a policy that we need to block the system call, and we pass it to the container that is running that we want to apply this policy to. So if you look on the screenshot, uh, let me grab the highlighter. Yeah, if you look at the screenshot, we have default action is allow everything. So what this will do is whatever system calls are there inside that Linux kernel, it will allow everything, but it will blacklist these calls which have the action of SCMP Act, ERR, and O. So this will not allow the container to run mkdir command. So if you look at the below section, sudo docker run rmit, uh, interactively we open the terminal interactively, and we pass the security policy seccomp policy in with the alpine image. So the image that we are using is alpine, and we try to pass mkdir and create a new file folder. As it was blocked, it says can't create directory new, operation not permitted. So like this, we can block or allow, whitelist or blacklist different system calls. Again, the system calls are very much dependent on the operating system that you are using. There are some system calls that are different in Alpine, and there are some system calls different in Ubuntu. So have a look on what system calls your operating system is using, and create your policy.json accordingly. and pass it into the pass it as a SecComp policy, and you are good to go with all the blocked and allowed system calls in your system. This helps a lot in keeping control of what a user can do and the user can't do. So I personally really like SecComp for this feature. There are other security tools as well, like AppArmor, SE Linux. So these uh, AppArmor and SE Linux gives a very granular control over the container activities. So in AppArmor and SE Linux, we create profiles uh, in which we define different aspects on what system calls to go, which user to which user can create what, and we create such profiles in AppArmor and SE Linux using SE Linux, which gives us granular control over the container activities, and they also help in securely isolating the environment. Then there is Trufflehog. So Trufflehog is not has not been made initially for scanning the containers for hard-coded secrets. It was used for uh, Git, like scanning Git repositories for any hard-coded secrets. So Trufflehog scan the containers for hardware secrets. If there are any secrets inside the container, it runs through and scans the container completely, and it gives us all the suspected secrets. Then mi contained, it gives information about what container runtime is being used, and as well as different features that are available inside the container, what system calls it allows. So this gives mi contained gives this kind of information. Then there is another vulnerability static analysis for container tool, that is Clear. um, it also scan containers for vulnerabilities. So these are a few tools that that we can utilize for protecting the containers. Now we look at security best practices. uh, again these tools like Trivi, Claire, they output a very like very large amount of information. So if we keep the base image that we build from as minimal as possible, it will also reduce the output from Trivi and Claire, that as there are very less dependencies on that system, less functionalities on that system, and it will just give us the ones that we really want to focus on, not everything that we don't really need in the first place. So prefer minimal base images while building your while building your containers. Use Docker ignore file to exclude files from build. So whenever you whenever you create a application whenever you create an application, uh, you use some kind of secrets that is required to uh, coordinate with the database or some kind of cloud providers. So for that, we can use Docker ignore to avoid getting those secrets from the container uh, to the container, getting stored into the container after the image is being built. So Docker ignore is just like get ignore. It ignores file that we want it to ignore from the build. The next one is create golden images. Golden images are hardened base images that can be used for further development. So you create a base image, and as a security person, you create a base image and you give it to the developers to utilize them as their base image. As it is already hardened, uh, the security issues that get into that container becomes very less. And while you're using EC2 instance, EC2 gives a user data field to set up context from the instance on what to have and what not to have. What all commands that we need to run before the container or before the EC2 instance starts. So this user data field is one time, it runs once the instance starts, and after that, this this gives a proper understanding of what all things are blocked from the system and what are not. So while doing a security audit, these things helps a lot. Then do not run containers as root. Running container as root, again, not a good idea. Create a user inside the containers, inside the containers, and use the container as that user. So adding this small code snippet that is from Alpine latest is a bad option. Alpine and a specific tag or the version, then creating a non-root user and shifting the user to that specific non-root user. Then again, do not commit secrets in Dockerfile or containers. You can use utilities like BuildKit to pass secrets to use in the container securely. Again, we have seen use copy of instead of add wherever possible. So using copy allows us to just take this specific file and copying it into inside the system. Whereas add, what it does is it does the same thing as copy, but if it is a zip file, it takes that specific zip and extracts it inside the system. So there can be different attacks that can be possible, like zip bomb. Um, these can be possible attack scenarios. So better to use copy instead of add wherever it is possible. So talking about resources, this is all I had to show on what are the best practices and uh, the different security tools. Now, talking about resources, uh, learn about containers and learn about your own environment. So, if you go to contained.af, so it is kind of a quiz game, which helps in understanding what a specific uh, what a specific container is and how that like what capabilities it uses and what all the different things. So as example, capnet draws of capabilities, uh, it allows you to use raw and packet sockets and to bind to any address for transparent proxy. So do we generally have access to capnet raw? So let me put and wget. If you are using it, it gives you a good understanding on how like what capabilities do and what they are capable of. So like this you can try out different things. Then security profiles for app armor and sec comp on GitHub. So this is just as simple. Spec Comp security profile. So yeah, so if you go to Mobi's profile, SecComp, so this is a default profile. So you can just take any of it, any of the syscall, and just block it or enable it for any specific. for any specific syscall for any specific operating system. So the security profiles for App Armor and Spec Comp, you can also write your own profiles for both these tools. Practical Guide to Write Dockerfile by Madhu Akula is a great place. Practical, where is it? Practical Guide to Write Dockerfile. This by Madhu Akula is a great resource where he talks about all the different security aspects of writing a Docker file and what to include, what not to include. Then CIS benchmark Docker will give you a brief and like overview of understanding on what Docker is and what are the checks that can be performed on a container image. And more than everything, Google. Google everything as much as you can. Hands on, try hands on. Spin up a container, break it, make it. Unless you really try your hands on the container, you won't be learning as much. So that is all from my side. So I am open for any questions. Thank you. My name is Kumar Ashwin. Do we have any questions? Among the scanners, which will be the most widely used Docker scanner for pen test? Uh, so the scanners depends upon the use case. I like Trivi, but Claire is also being used as much. Depends what kind of scanning and what kind of result would you want from that. So yeah, it completely depends upon the use case. Docker, you can also use Docker. Docker is really widely used. So I hope that answers your question. The slides will be up on my Twitter handle, Zorax Cardinal, in by end of the day today. I need to make some minor changes that I noticed. Is it secure to move running application from one container to other? Uh, it might break your application, and I don't think by it will, like, without stopping the container running container you can move directly, but I might be wrong, but that might break your container. So moving to from one container to another contains lots of challenges, like dependency issues, like hardware issues. What hardware does it does your application support? So all kind of things comes into picture. And before security wise, we have to think of usability, so and workability. So these two parameters, usability and workability, does not fit well for moving running containers from running applications from one container to another. So I hope that answer your questions. So can we create Docker? instances on cloud or devices better? Okay. So what do you think EC2 instances are? So there are different shared instances that we can use. Docker. So Docker, you can use they are containers. The EC2 instances are also containers. You can use Docker inside of those containers as well. It again depends upon the use case. If you are there to try out containers, go ahead, try it on your own machine. It will help you save some money. And if you want to deploy it into the production, you can uh, you can go for cloud. I mean, can we create Docker cloud and access directly instead of creating it? Yeah, you can definitely create it on cloud, not an issue. So the CTFs that we organize, we have been running Docker on EC2 instances rather than from our own machine. So yeah, that is completely possible. Awesome. Yeah, that was. Hope I am audible. Yeah, that was because I wanted to show that the Hadolint gives us that this is not a right command to use. That is not the right instruction. So you have to use from 0 to 65535. So that is why the intended error was there. I hope that clarifies it.
Okay, sir. If anyone else is having any doubt, please feel free to ask in the Q&A section.
Awesome.
So I think that's it. Thank you so much, sir. That was such an informative and wonderful session. We really had a great time listening to your experience and systemic works. I'm sure our audience are also overwhelmed by your session today. And we also hope to have your presence in our future activities.
Awesome.
Okay. Now we
Thank you so
have
much.
okay, thank you, sir. And we have reached the end of the session, and I would also like to thank each of your active participation in the Q&A section and entire section, and Mr. Kumar Ashwin himself one more for spending his valuable time with us. So again, now we're about to begin our next session on the topic secure software development lifecycle by Ms. Susha Surendran at 1 o'clock. And before moving on, I would also like to give a shout out to our community partners, Advisory Village, Coffee with Red Team, Air Strategies, Fiber Peace Foundation, etc. Our media partners, Bluepin and Security. Event organizer, RedTeam Hacker Academy and RedTeam Cybersecurity Labs. Supporting partners, CAFIT, Cyberdome Connecticut, Government Cyberpark World Coda, GTech and Payat. At the last, Tech Mother Hack the Box. Thank you all. We will automatically move to the next section at 1 o'clock. In the meanwhile, there are also different booths available in the left side of your screen. You can explore that too. Thank you so much, everyone.